Hi there, I'm Dave Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild, and today I'm going to help you take a look at making your combat encounters challenging for your players. If you're like me, at some point you've run into a situation where it seems like your players are just rolling over your bad guys and you quite don't know what to do. Well, over the years I've figured out a few tips and tricks that I can help you with, plus also I'll take a look and see what maybe you might be doing wrong. So without any further ado, let's roll the title screen and let's get into making your combat encounters challenging. Okay, we're going to jump right in. So let's take a quick look at the things you could be doing wrong during combat. The first thing is that you may be miscalculating the CR. Now, the challenge rating of the monster, let's say you have one that's challenge rating 5. And how that works is that means it should be a challenge for 4 player characters level 5. So that's what you want to keep in mind. If you have an extra player in the group or an extra couple players, it's going to make it really easy for them to defeat that monster. So you want to take a look at maybe adjusting the challenge rating for how many players you got. You want to make sure that's correct. Now, is challenge rating the end-all be-all for determining combat encounters? No, because I've had challenge ratings where it looks like my monster's got a real low challenge rating, I got more players than the challenge rating would recommend, and my monsters walk all over them. But other times, I've got monsters that should be very powerful, and maybe the CR is even a little bit higher, and the players, I think according to the CR, they may be underprepared, but yet they walk right through them. It's a good gauge to start, but sometimes it's not always perfect, which means you're going to have to, through playing the game, see your general power level of the players, how they work together, and for players working together against a common threat, if they're a well-oiled machine, it's going to be a lot easier to defeat a monster of the appropriate CR for the amount of players you have. But without getting too deep into that, just remember, take a look at your CR. At early levels, I think the CR is actually not too bad. At higher levels, I think it's kind of skewed a little bit. It doesn't quite work out, but it's still a good gauge for you to work with, especially after we discuss some of the other things that I've got on my list. Okay, so the second thing for you to remember is you might have the wrong monster for the environment you are running in. I had this happen with a gibbering mouther. So my players, they were in a tavern, and they actually was an inn connected to it, and they went upstairs and they went into a small room, a 10 by 15 room, and they opened up a trunk and there was a gibbering mouther there, and it just owned my players. I had like 3 or 4 players up in there checking out that room, and it totally owned them. A couple of them almost died because of it before they could actually get out of the room and destroy the thing. And then later, just for gee whiz, I knew it wasn't going to be a challenge for them, but I wanted to see how it would play out. So I put the same gibbering mouther later on in a large open area where they had plenty of time to encounter it, realize what it was, and move around. And with that thing's ridiculously slow speed, and even though it has some really neat abilities, it just wasn't nothing for the players to walk through. So it really, really is important to put the proper monster in the proper environment. Something like a gibbering mouther with a slow speed but unique abilities to mess with the players' minds and their mobility is really good in a small, tight, confined space. Whereas out in the open, not so much. So you want to keep that in mind. Take a look at the environment that you're going to be putting the monster in and see if it's going to work out, if it's going to work just right. But like an area, for instance, that's mostly water, you're probably going to want something a little more aquatic than something land-based. So number 3 on the list of what you may be doing wrong is having too few monsters, too few enemies. Again, this kind of goes back to the CR, but also in terms of making the combat challenging. Don't forget that big bad evil guys, or BBEGs, they're going to have minions. They're going to have lieutenants, they're going to have bandit captains, they're going to have cult leaders, and even these guys, these mini bosses, they're going to have minions as well. And even though these minions, let's say you've got a bunch of level 10 characters running around, you think, well, these minions, they'd be equal to commoners. They're no challenge. But they will be, because your players can only attack so many targets. Now it's true, your mages, man, they can drop fireballs and wipe out 10, 20 guys at a shot. You know, there's lots of different things the players can do. They got multiple attacks and everything, but the more minions you have, the more bad guys you have, the less focused your players will be because there's so many bad guys running around. And when you just start putting bad guys on the table, they don't know how powerful these guys are. Sure, you do. Behind the screen, you're looking at them going, well, I got one bandit captain, and he's kind of a challenge, and all the other guys are basically just commoners with swords. They're going to walk through these guys. However, you know that the players do not. And if you keep these guys moving around, you can easily put your players off balance during combat. And another thing too is I've noticed that no matter how I balance it out, even if I make my monster tougher than it really needs to be to fight the players, if I got 6 players and 1 monster in the initiative order, if I roll crappy and my monster goes at the end of the initiative, he might not even get a chance to attack because everybody gets their attack before the monster. Or even if the monster gets in the beginning, I might get a good hit in on a player, maybe even kill him or come close to killing him, but yet then all the other players get to go before the monster again. So again, the monster gets beat up on pretty quick and dies shortly thereafter. If he's in the middle initiative, it's the same thing. It really doesn't matter because the monster only gets to go first versus all the players. Now you think, well, what if he's got like 6 attacks, like a Marilith or something like that? She's got multiple attacks. It's good, but nothing replaces multiple opponents, because instead of all of them concentrating the firepower on one creature, now they have to worry about multiple. And you think, well, they'll just kill all these super low level bandits really easy. Yes, but the thing is though, when the ranger goes to attack one of these other low level bandits, or the barbarian goes to attack one of these low level bandits, they go in melee, they hit him for a whole bunch of damage, split them apart, heads rolling, arms flying off, but all that damage went to basically just a chump blocker. You know, he's just there to take the hit so your main bad guy doesn't, which means basically the barbarian wasted all that extra damage on a creature that, well, he didn't need to waste all that damage on, but he had no choice since he's pretty much strictly melee to do all that damage to that one character, which means your big boss didn't have to soak up that damage and will probably be around for maybe another turn. So you really want to take a look at throwing out some more minions. And this way, instead of your monster being at the head, middle, or the end of the initiative, and then your players just running them over, you've got your monster at the very beginning. Let's say you roll go to initiative. Your monster's right there at the head of the initiative, and then maybe you got a couple players, and then you got 4 of your guys next, even though they're just cannon fodder, but you got 4 more guys that you might be able to roll natural 20 with, you might be able to roll double damage on, or maybe they got spells like Magic Missile. Magic Missile is still Magic Missile, even if it's a low-level caster. And then maybe you got a couple other players, and then you got maybe 1 more bad guy before initiative starts over. Then it's your big bad guy again, a couple players, your 4 bad guys again, or whoever still survived, and so on and so forth. So you've got more chances to do damage and more chances for the players to worry about where they need to put their attacks and how they need to formulate their plan for fighting. So those are the 3 things right there that you may be doing wrong. And that is miscalculating your CR, the wrong monster for the environment, and too few enemies. Now also, quite the opposite, you could have too many enemies if your players are having a tough time during combat. So keep that in mind as well. But now, let's move on and take a look at a couple things that you can do to make combat way more challenging. Okay, so here it is. What you can do to make your combats more challenging for players. First of all, movement. I see a lot of DMs, and I'm guilty of it as well. Put the monster out there, hardly move it, players fight it, dead, combat over. Pretty boring. Pretty standard fare for the players. They're not really worried about it. Even during combat, they'll be distracted on their phone, they'll be flipping through the books. No. Get that monster moving. Even if you know the player's going to walk through them, doesn't matter. Don't make them an easy target. Don't make them easy to kill. Make them hard to kill. get that monster, move him around the board. If he flies, fly up out of the range of any melee guys. If you can swim, have him swim out to someplace else. Maybe that monster has a ranged attack, so he can swim out to someplace else, like a little sandbar or something where the players can't get him easily, and then he can shoot some ranged attacks while the players got to take time to close the distance, and only the characters with ranged attacks can attack him. Do that. Use your movement fully. Stay out of the way of your players' attacks. Move around the board. Just the sheer fact that you're moving around the board is going to throw the players off. Use Misty Step, dash, do whatever you can to throw the players off. Keep those monsters moving. Keep combat dynamic, and it'll keep your players more engaged, especially if it seems like you're not just moving around, but moving around with a purpose. And that can be kind of disconcerting for players. What's he doing? Where's he going? What's about to happen? Why is he doing that? Now, why is he standing still and laughing? See, during combat, little things like that, you move to a position like, haha, now I'm where I need to be. Haha, prepare to die. That could kind of unnerve some players. And does it really mean anything? Will it really affect the mechanics of combat? No, but it will pull the players in a little more. And that's what you want. You want to pull the players in a little more to your world. So now all this movement brings me to my next thing, and that's use cover. Now, if you got half cover, you get +2 AC. If you got 3/4 cover, which means whatever you're behind is covering 3/4 of your body, you get +5 AC. And if you're behind total cover, you can't be attacked at all, with certain exceptions. So use cover, and especially if you've got a bunch of low-level flunkies, do what the players do. Have these low-level flunkies hide behind a wall, step out, attack, step back in, move, attack, move. Because when they're behind total cover, they can't be hit. They step out from behind total cover, attack, and then they use the rest of their movement to step right back. And then when it comes to a player's turn, they can't do anything. So use cover to your advantage. And plus it makes the players, it forces them to be more tactical and to move. And they may even have to spread out their forces, and in which case, if they do, that could be more dangerous for them, hence more challenging for them. So use cover to your advantage. Players can, so should you. And if your players don't use cover, well, once you start using cover and they realize that that's a thing in your game, then they're going to start using cover. So combat is more interesting now. When you lay out one of those maps on the table, or when you pull up one of those digital maps, all those objects aren't there just for background. You know, those are physical objects. A tree, a rock. I mean, those things are there. A wall. Use them. Use them. Now, I said something just a second ago that brings me to my third thing. This is used range attacks. Remember, I've got a low-level minion. He's hiding behind a wall. He ducks behind it. Then he steps out, shoots, steps back in. Used range attacks. Because ranged attacks really help equalize those guys who aren't any good at melee, who don't have a lot of hit points. And if you can keep your minions or other villains back behind cover and using their ranged attacks against the players, that's going to be really good, especially if your players are lacking in ranged attacks. Use ranged attacks to your advantage, because the players can do it, so should you. Is every combat going to be like this? No, but it will. When you do it, it's going to be very dynamic, it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be more threatening, and the players are going to, they're going to be sweating a little more. And also, too, when you use ranged attacks, don't just put all your bad guys in one spot. Fireball. I mean, come on, let's go. Fireball, Cloud Kill, stuff like that we have to be worried about. Maybe Cloud Kill a little later levels, but Fireball, the players get pretty quick. And there's a lot of AoE effects that you have to be aware about. Your players are aware about it, and so are you. So use ranged attacks. If you have anybody who can do area effect attacks, do it. Use AoE attacks against your players. Plus, split your forces. Spread those guys out. Don't lump them all in one spot. That way they're being attacked from multiple sides. They can't just be like, oh, he's right there, let's go rush him and attack him. Nope. Spread out your forces, so that way, no matter who they rush, who they destroy, there's still other guys out there that are popping out, shooting them with ranged attacks. Okay, so now the last thing that I'm going to tell you that you're going to want to do, and that is you're going to want to optimize your monster's abilities. So now if you're like me, you're pretty busy, And sometimes you just don't get time to sit down and research and read and plan out all your encounters and combats, or even have an idea of it a lot of times before game night. It happens. But if you get the chance, sit down and some of the monsters you plan on using, read their abilities. Look at their attacks, their special abilities, spells, the kind of movement they have, what kind of vision do they have? Use these abilities. Understand what they have. If they have a spell list, take a look and see what spells they may favor, or in a certain environment, what might be good for them to utilize. Stuff that might be realistic, or just stuff that would be advantageous for them to use. You really want to take a look at some of your monsters, especially some of these high level guys, and see what they can do. And that means don't just put your guy in the middle of the battlefield and let your players whoop up on him. I mean, if he's a beholder, he's going to fly. He's going to use all his different eye beams. Now, sure, in the DMG in the monster manual, you can roll randomly for the eyes, but I don't know, sometimes I like to choose, especially if a player hits the beholder with a really damaging spell. Well, I'm going to change my targets. I'm not attacking the closest guy anymore. I'm going to use Disintegrate on that guy that just hit me with that really damaging spell. Why? Because that person's a threat. Or I direct my minions to do it, and they do that. There's a lot of different options you can use. But again, optimize your monster's abilities, look at what he can do, and proceed from there. Only 10, 15 minutes tops is all you really need to look over that little chart and maybe even read a little bit about the background of the monster itself, and instantly you're going to have some really good ideas of how to make combat more challenging for your players. All right, and that's pretty much it. Those are the 3 things I think you might be doing wrong for combat, and the 4 things I think you can do to make your combat more challenging for your players. Well, thanks for joining me today. I'm David Hunt, owner of GameMasters Guild, telling you to stay safe, play great games, and I'll see you real soon.